Hello, Patreon people. Welcome yet again to our weekly update. It is I, Professor Mobtop. Thank you so much as always. Happy new month. It is now October as we progress slowly but surely with the book. I've been digging through 1965 in music, as I have been for about a month or so now. This was an especially busy week because I did a couple classes which were a lot of fun. One was for a library, the other was a private class for some people, and it was a lot of fun, but I got to dig into some stuff that I hadn't really checked into in a while. And a lot of that brings us to our weekly audio. But for 1965 in music this week, I've been focusing on the British invasion, not just the Kinks, which I could write my own book on the Kinks, but Gerry and the Pacemakers, who were also from Liverpool and managed by Brian Jones. The Rolling Stones had a really big year in 1965, particularly with As Tears Go By, which was a much softer song than a lot of the other songs that the Stones generally had, which were the tougher R&B kind of songs. I wrote a little bit about Herman's Hermits and Henry VIII, which was first done by a guy named Harry Champion in the early part of the 1900s. That was an old song when they recorded it. And Freddie and the Dreamers, who is much as I personally enjoy them, they didn't really stack up to some of the other British invasion bands, and by 1965 they quickly fell to the wayside. But they did have a little bit of success along the way. This week, for your audio, you will be getting 4 parts, and they will be the 3 parts before and the part that goes after the audio from last week. But there's going to be 3 parts on Dig It. Now, you might be thinking, how could he talk so much about a 51-second song? Well, you will be surprised. In January of 1969, during the Let It Be sessions, the Beatles would from time to time just kind of wander around and sort of aimlessly try to improvise and jam. Most of the time it just wasn't very interesting. They just didn't, they weren't inspired. It just wasn't great. Sometimes, however, it was a lot of fun, and one of the things they did was kind of create a song called Dig It. Now, there's a bit of a song that you'll hear a hunk of audio of called Can You Dig It?, which is just them saying, can you dig it, and shouting out different proper nouns and people and places. There's also one that's very similar, and it's called Get Off. You'll hear a hunk of that as well. Within the audio, you will hear a bit of a 8-minute version of Dig It, where Heather Eastman, who was Linda McCartney's daughter from a previous marriage, who was a young girl, around 8 years old at the time, and she came into the studio, and the Beatles were cool enough to let her scream and yell on a record. There's a faster version of Dig It, which is probably also called Can You Dig It? And then in the audio you get to hear about Georgie Wood, who is wee Georgie Wood, and you get to hear about some of the transitional audio, which is the hunks of audio that Phil Spector ultimately selected to play in between tracks. And then after 3 parts on Dig It, you get to hear about some of the other more traditional songs that they did along the way. Now, at one point, John introduced a brand new song called Polythene Pam, and that reminded them of an old song that they used to play, which is called Maggie May. On the Let It Be album, you hear a chunk of Maggie May. They played this a few times throughout the sessions, as well as a song called Fancy Me Chances, which might have been another Lennon-McCartney original. Now, Maggie May itself comes from the 1700s, but the version that the Beatles were more interested and more familiar with was by the Vipers, and that came out in 1957, and it was on the Parlophone label. Now, this is possible, but it's not confirmed because it's not printed on the record label itself, but that track was very likely produced by George Martin. Not only will you get to hear about Maggie May and the possibility of George Martin producing the Vipers version, you'll hear about how he definitely produced a version of it by Judy Garland. As always, thank you for checking your email. Thank you for the really nice comments from last week, too. I really appreciated all of them. Thank you for always being you, and thank you for being part of the Beatle University party. Monday and Tuesday of this week, I'm going to do my best to sit in front of the computer every waking moment and do as much writing as I can, because sadly, baseball is not that important anymore for me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You have a very nice week.